Severe Tropical Cyclone Ilsa has exploded in intensity over the past couple of days. It's now a Category 5 strength system on the Australian scale and approaching that strength on the Saffir-Simpson scale as well. This is your latest update brought to you by Force 13 this April 13th, 2023, with this monster cyclone approaching the West Australian coastline, where a landfall between or around Pardoo, where Roadhouse and De Grey is expected later tonight into early tomorrow morning, with monster winds expected, a powerful storm surge and extreme rainfall around the landfall site, and areas between Port Headland and Broome must be on high alert for strong cyclone impacts. So currently winds right now at 3 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time, 225 kilometres an hour, 10 minutes sustained, with stronger gusts approaching 300 kilometres an hour, a pressure of 928 millibars at 18.8 degrees south, 118.6 degrees east. In 12 hours, the storm will have made landfall. It'll be boasting winds of around the same at 225 kilometres an hour. However, at landfall, the storm is expected to have winds of around 240 kilometres an hour, 10 minutes sustained. 1 minute sustained winds of around 275 kilometres an hour expected, with higher gusts to 315 kilometres an hour. This is essentially a 100 nautical mile wide tornado moving towards the West Australian coastline, and this will be the worst cyclone impacts the West Australian coastline has seen in definitely quite a long time, that's for sure. And it could be one of the strongest cyclones to cross the Australian coastline in recent history. And as you can see, lots of warnings in effect right now, extending inland to Telfer, and then into more remote Indigenous communities inside the West Australian interior. So you can see on the bomb forecast track map, the storm is expected to make landfall as a Category 5 strength cyclone on the Australian scale. The tropical cyclone warning in effect between Wim Creek and Badgingarra, excluding Badgingarra. That includes Wallal Downs, Pardoo, Roadhouse, De Grey, Marble Bar, and Port Headland. The Port Headland metro is under a cyclone warning and a red alert. People need to get to shelter immediately right now. And then the cyclone warning extends inland to Telfer and more remote Indigenous communities, and a cyclone watch in effect for more remote Indigenous communities further inland as well, extending inland to around Balgo Hill. The storm is expected to weaken rapidly because of the strong intensity that the storm is at right now. Weakening will be, well, theoretically quite slow to occur, and the storm still could be a massive, powerful Category 3 storm as it approaches Telfer. It will definitely be a Category 4 strength storm as it moves further north of Marble Bar, and any wobble in the track will bring stronger conditions, possibly to Port Headland or Marble Bar, and that is something we do not want to see at this point, but we cannot be ruling out severe tropical cyclone impacts for either of those locations at this time. In fact, it's looking more likely by the minute. So here's a look at the multimodal diagnostic comparison. You can see the HWF still expecting a massive Category 5 landfall and peak from the system. As per the Saffir-Simpson scale, the storm's already there on the Australian scale. However, both scales are slightly different in how they are constructed. Good agreements in track. However, I'm still expecting a bit more of a western shift as this storm approaches land. Wobbles will mean a lot in terms of impacts for certain locations. If this storm shifts further west from where it is now, we're going to see severe tropical cyclone conditions over the Port Headland metro tonight. Now, just before I go on to forecast models and satellite imagery, I just want to bring up the Rowley Shoals observations from earlier today. The peak wind gust was 235 kilometres an hour. Keep in mind, this is 12 hours ago when the storm was significantly weaker. That's 127 knots, nearly Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. The minimum central pressure was 942.3 millibars recorded just inside the eye wall, as highlighted in the red. Those were observations taken within the eye of the storm, and then the yellow observations were within the eye wall. This storm absolutely trashed the Rowley Shoals weather station, as you can see pictured as well from the Perth Weather Live Facebook post. That's been destroyed, and I imagine it will take quite a while to rebuild that, considering its remote location. However, I just want to bring that up as a little bit of food for thought, considering how powerful this cyclone is. So let's take a look at the GFS model at this point. The GFS is calling for a monster landfall of around 115 knots. That's plausible at this time. The storm would actually have to weaken significantly for that to happen, so landfall is likely to be stronger than that. Minimum central pressure of around 915 millibars as well, so the storm will have to drop about another 10 millibars to get towards that intensity. It is going to be a very powerful cyclone before it moves inland past Alice Springs and will probably disintegrate over the Queensland area, maybe over Mount Isa or Cloncurry or that sort of area, and heavy rainfall will be brought to those inland areas, which will probably further exacerbate flooding concerns in the Murray-Darling River Basin if the storm moves a little bit further south or west from what we are expecting at this time, which, as I said earlier, is is looking likely. But the key points right now, a monster tropical cyclone is expected to cross the WA coastline, and it will bring severe conditions to the Port Headland area, and anywhere between Port Headland and Badgingarra, we are expecting severe tropical cyclone conditions to be brought ashore. That also includes inland locations up towards Marble Bar. So let's take a look at forecast rainfall. Massive amounts of rainfall is expected. This is in inches. I'll convert it into millimetres for you. Isolated totals up to 350 millimetres are expected along the WA coastline where this storm makes landfall. Inland, the rainfall will be a little bit less, but still could approach 150 millimetres or more. Port Headland is expecting around 100 millimetres of rain tonight, and maybe a further 100 millimetres of rain tomorrow. The storm is going to be a very wet one. Thankfully, the storm will likely pick up some speed as it moves inland, so locations shouldn't receive more than about 25 to 50 millimetres, maybe some isolated totals of around 75 millimetres. It really depends on what band you get under from this cyclone, considering it is definitely a banding cyclone, that's for sure. But you can see inland still expecting a lot of rainfall, definitely within the realm of around 50 to 75 millimetres. Isolated totals up to 100 millimetres are plausible at this time. So here's a look at some satellite imagery, looking really sharp on this satellite imagery, that's for sure. This is not a picture that we wanted to be looking at tonight, that's for sure. The storm is a very powerful one. The outer eye walls are starting to come ashore right now. Very good outflow towards the northern side of the system, nice inflow developing towards the eastern side of the system. Thunderstorms blowing up as far south as Meekatharra at this point. They are directly associated with this storm. It is certainly a banding dominated cyclone, and it is a very powerful cyclone at that. Not one to be messed with, that's for sure. There's hints that this storm might be about to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle, which would be a good thing. It could knock about 10 knots off the storm's intensity. However, that could go south very fast, because if it was a quick eye wall replacement cycle, we could definitely be seeing a monster cyclone cross the coast far stronger than what we are expecting right now, which is kind of around 130, 135 knots of the sustained winds, and that will bring phenomenal seas as well. But that's the latest that I have on Severe Tropical Cyclone Ilsa. There'll be more updates and live coverage on the Force 13 networks. Make sure you stay tuned for that. I'll catch you on the next storm. Goodbye.